Sergio Perez last year had a good season as 2022 was by far his best season in Formula 1 with 2 victories and 11 podium finishes. He finished third in the Drivers' Championship and helped Red Bull to secure their first Constructors' Championship since 2013. But for me, 2023 is going to be a very important year in the career of Sergio Perez. As of this video being released, Perez is signed until the end of 2024. However, if there's one thing we have learned in Formula 1, the contract length typically does not mean a great deal of anything. Welcome to why 2023 is an important year for Sergio Perez. So after such a brilliant year in 2022, why should 2023 be important? He should be safe, right? Well, with Red Bull, if you do not perform, you will very quickly lose your place in the team. Red Bull is probably one of the most brutal teams in F1 when it comes to dropping their drivers because they will do it on short notice. For example, look at what they have done over the years with drivers such as Kvyat and Gasly. And for Sergio Perez, whilst yes, 2022 was a great year, it really should have been better. Perez had the car to finish second in the Drivers' Championship. For the first half of the year, it was very back and forth between Ferrari and Red Bull, but in the second half of the year, after Spa, Red Bull had a massive advantage in terms of pace, which can be seen by the fact that Red Bull won every single race except for one after the Belgian Grand Prix. Even with the pace that they had, Sergio Perez was still unable to beat Leclerc to second in the Drivers' Championship, despite the fact that after the Mexican Grand Prix, the Red Bull duo were first and second in the Drivers' Championship. This on its own really should not be a huge factor. Red Bull still won the championship, so what does that really matter? Well, it matters a lot to Red Bull. They've still never had a 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship, and I think they are desperate to achieve that result. And failing that in 2022 could potentially be seen as a negative against Sergio Perez. But that is only a minor point. The major thing is that in 2022, Red Bull were clearly the fastest for about half the year. In 2023, I don't think Red Bull will be clearly fastest for too long in the season. Towards the back end of last year, Mercedes made incredible strides forwards towards the Red Bull team, and it seems like at long last, Mercedes have finally understood what went wrong with their car in 2022. And now for 2023, if Mercedes have fixed those issues, then as we saw at the back end of 2022, they should have a car that at a lot of circuits can compete with Red Bull and potentially even beat them more often. And I do believe that will happen. I don't think Mercedes will only win one race in 2023. I do think that they will win a lot more, and let's be honest, they have by some distance the strongest driver pairing in the sport with George Russell and 7-time F1 world champion Lewis Hamilton. With this driver pairing, I mentioned in my 5 predictions for 2023 video, which you can see in the description below if you haven't already checked it out, that I believe Mercedes will win the Constructors' Championship in 2023. And at this moment in time, I do still believe that Mercedes will win the Constructors' Championship. They will not be as far off the pace as they were last year, and I do believe that they will be ahead of Perez a lot in 2023. Alongside the Mercedes factor, there is also the Ferrari factor which needs to be taken into account. In the back end of the year, it did seem like Ferrari had taken a slight step backwards, especially after the mid-season rule change in Spa. However, with rumours floating around that they have been able to increase their reliability in higher power modes, we could see Ferrari turn their power unit up a little bit more in 2023. And well, that was an issue for them towards the end of last season. I also believe that this year, with the new team principal, Fred Vasseur, on board, we will see Ferrari opt to focus more on one driver as opposed to trying to be as fair as possible, and they will focus more on the driver that is more likely to win them a championship, and that driver is Charles Leclerc. As I also mentioned in my 5 predictions for 2023 video, I had Charles Leclerc down to win the Drivers' Championship. And well, since then I may have had some slightly other thoughts as I've thought about it more and more, but I do still think Charles Leclerc will be in the mix for the Drivers' Championship, and I still do think that Ferrari will focus on him and help him have the best chance to actually win the Drivers' Championship. Now, with the Ferrari and Mercedes factors, why does this mean 2023 will be important for Perez? Well, it actually means a lot. If in 2023 both Mercedes and at least one Ferrari is consistently ahead of Perez, then for Verstappen, his races are probably going to be a lot more difficult unless he can run and hide, because Mercedes will potentially be deploying tactics that will force the hand of Red Bull at times. This could leave Verstappen vulnerable to losing races that he should otherwise have won. This would make the Drivers' Championship battle a lot more exciting. But this is not the only factor. If they are consistently beating Perez, and with Sainz getting involved too, Red Bull will probably not be able to retain their Constructors' Championship. And imagine this being the scenario. Perez just doesn't have the pace of the top guys when the Ferrari and Mercedes cars are a little bit closer to Red Bull in terms of pace. This means that Verstappen gets boxed into bad scenarios, which ultimately leads to him losing races. He loses enough races due to a 2-on-1 scenario, and then loses the Drivers' Championship. Alongside this, Red Bull then somehow slipped to third in the Constructors' Championship, despite starting with the fastest car. Imagine that scenario. Verstappen will be furious, and all the blame will lie at Perez's feet. Okay, that is a scenario, but it could happen. And if it does happen, then we could be seeing the end of the road for Perez. Another reason 2023 is an important year for Perez is because Red Bull recently rehired their former driver Daniel Ricciardo to the team. Perez thankfully doesn't really have to worry about the AlphaTauri duo because, well, let's be honest, that is one of the weakest lineups on the grid. Yuki Tsunoda probably isn't going to be in the team much longer, and Nick de Vries is probably not going to be in the sport for too long if he has a bad season as well. But he may have to worry about the Honey Badger, especially if Ricciardo can rekindle some of that old magic that he had whenever he is in the simulator, or maybe even doing a practice session or a test session. Could this rehiring be an early warning sign to Perez that he has to step up his game for next year? Well, I potentially think it could be. Any signs of Perez consistently finishing in 5th or 6th, then we could potentially see Christian Horner begin to look back to the past and look at seeing what Ricciardo could do. So look to the past to look to the future. Another reason 2023 will be important is Pirelli will be changing the structure of the tyres. The tyres in 2022 led to the cars being a lot more understeery than in previous years, and that understeer worked in the favour of drivers like Perez and Carlos Sainz. But for 2023, Pirelli are altering the tyres to help try and reduce the chronic understeer of the cars. And with this reduction in understeers, if they can actually pull it off, Perez could struggle with a change of tyres and lose some more pace, which would see him fall even further back. Leclerc and Verstappen do enjoy a more oversteery setup, so we should see them benefit from the change. And Hamilton, well, Hamilton can drive whatever he is given, but he also prefers a car with a bit more oversteer, which means he should be happy about that too. If this change does negatively affect Perez, could he be under more pressure to perform? I think he might be. So that is some of the reasons why I think 2023 is an important year for Perez. He needs to improve his performances if Ferrari and Mercedes are closer to Perez. But that is what I think. The question is though, what do you think? Do you think Perez will be under pressure to perform this year despite the fact he has a contract until 2024? Let me know in the comment section down below. And as always, comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thanks for watching guys. Bye.